How would you describe what you're trying to do?
We're trying to restore native habitat from land that's been damaged and put under agricultural use for probably over a century. And we're just trying to bring back the native plants, and hopefully native animals will follow.
So how do you feel about what you're doing right now?
It's exciting, it's fun, it's challenging. I mean, after spending 30 years in a profession where you kind of became good at what you did, I mean, now we're brand new at this. We don't know what we don't know, and we're learning a lot as we go. But it's fun, it's exciting. We've always liked being outside and being in nature and hiking and things of that nature, so it's fun. But it's challenging to try to learn what the right thing is to do sometimes.
What's that? Like this. It's kind of looking like...
I think that's a frostweed, and they call them that even though it doesn't look like much, because when it freezes, the bottom of its stem will explode. Then the fluids will come out and create like these fat icicles all around the base. So whenever it's frozen, the past few times we've been coming out and checking for exploding frostweed. But so it didn't get cold enough here. Other people have had theirs explode, but not us.
So what would you say sort of motivated you to start this project?
I think just the news reports of the climate change and the loss of native habitat all over the world. You know, the forests being cut and burned, and the oceans warming up and their habitats changing, and just, I suppose, the knowledge that there's so many organisms out there that are dependent just on one other single organism. You know, a certain bee is needing a very specific flower type, and just because you have a nice green pasture doesn't mean that you've replicated the habitat for that creature. A big field of Bermuda grass is just essentially a desert. So I think just the awareness of how much we're losing, how many organisms we stand to lose, you know, that we'll just never be able to see again. They won't be around when our grandkids are growing up. That just made us wonder if there wasn't some little piece of land we could rescue to try to help. You know, this is a small enough piece of property that we're not going to be able to help many large animals. We can't focus in our plan on deer. We just don't have enough acreage. But bees and songbirds, we've got enough land to try to support them. So I think it was just the desire to build something back up. You know, we've contributed to a lot of the damage on the earth, so how can we make up for it a little bit? Dead looking. Of course, it did look better with water in it, but I have some pictures of us wading around in it then, after the cows were gone, but then it's got us and the dogs in it. So
that's okay. You live here, so I would say that that's fine. So what would you say your motivation was for starting?
A lot of it was Christy's passion was a big part of it. You know, it was always her. She had this vision for how to, you know, convert something to prairie. I didn't really understand it initially, quite frankly. It was sort of like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, but it's just grass, right? And what you figure out is it's really not just grass. It's a whole ecosystem of bees and birds and grasses and shrubs and trees and how all those things interact and feed off each other. So it's incredibly complex ecosystem, and I didn't really understand any of that when I started. I just thought, yeah, it's just grass, you know, it's just like your yard, but it's not. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Is there any specific big projects that you're working on right now for that?
We're still wrapping up a project which is hard to say that it's specific to native habitat, but because the springs were dammed up, now the dam has to be maintained. And as part of the getting the wildlife tax valuation, you can maintain water sources. And it is a wildlife draw to have a consistent source of water. So we've been maintaining the dam by removing trees from it, and now we're trying to find out what native plants you should plant on the slope of a dam, because it's a pretty specific plant requirement that can sometimes be underwater and sometimes be several feet out of the water, is on a slope where it's going to be subject to a lot of erosion forces. So, but, you know, and also native. We don't want to definitely introduce any more invasives here. So that's one of the projects. The main things we focused on are what will help meet our requirements to get our wildlife tax valuation, which is a kind of agricultural tax exemption, but the state of Texas has decided they'll give you now the same tax break for ag use if you will convert your land to supporting wildlife, because Texas was just losing almost all of its land, you know, huge percentages of land for the wild animals to live. So in order to take advantage of that, we have to meet certain criteria. Providing water is one, hence the dam project. Providing shelter, so we've built a bat house. It's actually a rocket box model. So it'll be a tall, thin, multi-chamber box that will be mounted on top of a flagpole. It needs to be high up in the air because the bats actually drop in order to fly. They can't just be standing on their feet and fly, so they have to swoop down. And it has to be so far from any trees where their predators like hawks could hide. And you don't want any vegetation growing up right around it so that things like raccoons could climb up to it. So we had a master naturalist out here to help us choose the placement. So now we have our box, we have our location, we have our bowl, our pole. All that's needed is Jim to dig a hole and concrete it in and mount it, and then come next spring, hope for the best. Otherwise, we chose to address one of the categories of predator control. The predators we have on the property would be mainly feral wild hogs and fire ants. So we chose to go after fire ants. So we spread fire ant bait all over. So those are the things that kind of check off some boxes that sort of clear. We started it, we finished it, and hopefully that'll help us get our tax exemption. Just ongoing projects, removing invasive species. When we get a chance, we cut down China berries, we cut ligustrum, cedar trees. Even though cedar are kind of native to this area, they're treated as invasives because they've been allowed to take over land where they wouldn't have been because of overgrazing and fire suppression. And they really, really eat up a lot of our water. They prevent a lot of rainfall from reaching the ground, and then their roots take up a lot and they'll dry up springs and rivers and things just with their sheer numbers. We're in the planning stages and how to reseed some of the areas then and grow native plants in the place of invasives. For agricultural use, many people seed or plant their fields with Bermuda grass, which is not actually from Bermuda. I think it's from Asia or someplace, but nevertheless, it's not native, it's not American, and it's really, really hard to get rid of because it reproduces in many ways, above ground, below ground, with seeds. And so we've had to work with the state and with the USDA on figuring out how to get rid of it, which could take multiple applications of herbicide or plowing it over and over. It's not going to be an easy task. So we've just been working with experts and specialists on how to even begin with that.
Do you think that this has been a good project just for you?
Yeah,
in general?
absolutely. I mean, I love being outside. Christy and I have always, we get to explore the place. We bought the place 18 months ago. There's a little parts of it we still haven't seen. Every time we go hiking around in different places, we find different plants and different animals and things of that nature. So I love it. And it's brought us closer together to work on this together, and there'll be a lot more opportunities to do that going forward.